let's talk about the book, but let's not talk about the obvious part of the book. We'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about the book from the perspective of maybe I want to write a book. Maybe one of my athlete guys, listeners, maybe my business leader wants to write a book. Tell me and teach us something about writing a book, Patrick, before we talk about your book.
You don't want to hear what I'm going to say.
I do.
Don't write a book.
All right.
Don't write a freaking book. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Moving on from Patrick.
No, I'm just kidding. But writing a book, Keith, shit. It's honestly, it's been one of the hardest things I've ever done. And if somebody would have told me how hard it was going to be to write this freaking book and how much I would have to push just to get the sales that I've gotten or the recognition, I honestly don't know if I would have done it. It is one of the hardest things that you're ever going to do. I thought starting a company was hard. Writing a book is different because it's like a personal project. It's a personal mission. Nobody gives a shit if you write this thing. Nobody's gonna, unless you have a publishing deal, nobody's gonna hold you accountable to finishing it. Right? I chose to self-publish. When people told me publishers were gonna take 90% of my revenue, I was like, fuck that. Nobody's taking 90% of my work. That's not happening in my universe. Okay, that's just not gonna happen. So the answer was I had to do it all on my own. Like I had to learn how to become an author. And man, it was horribly hard. Tips that I would give to survive the book writing process. First of all, get an editor. You have to get somebody who can sanitize and read the stuff that you're writing, because you might think it's poetry and somebody's going to look at it and say, this is garbage, right? So you have to have a neutral, independent person who's reviewing your writing and giving you real feedback on what they're seeing. Okay. And it has to be somebody who's a lot of experience writing books, who's seen this stuff. So I was fortunate to run into my editor and fellow writer, Richard Bainan. He was introduced to me from another friend of mine from business school, because I went to one of these top business schools and there's a big mafia of alumni all over the world. So my business school connections helped me with everything. And one of my business school buddies was like, dude, you got to talk to this guy. He's edited like 5 of my books. He knows what he's doing. You don't know shit. You should talk to him. So I talked to him. And he took my 700-page draft that I'd worked through COVID, like 2 long years writing this thing, which I thought was awesome.
All proud, right? You're the best.
Yeah, he read it. And he like calls me 2 weeks later. Hey, I've got some good news and some bad news. He was a British guy. I've got some good news and some bad news. I was like, all right, what's the good news? The good news is I love the stories. They're brilliant. It's so deep. It's so authentic. I was like, all right. What's the bad news? The bad news is the writing's fucking atrocious. You got to start all over again. And I was like, oh my God. And I'm like sitting there running a startup in Chile, and I'm like 7,000 miles away from family. And I'm just like, I'm like trying to, get my company to survive. And I'm like, I can't like rewrite this book. But I think having somebody who can critique your writing, having somebody who can structure your writing, like he changed the structure of my book. Right. It's like it was written in a different person and he changed it to like third person or whatever it is in today. And I had originally written it in first person. He was like, no, it's got to be in third person. And then he changed other things. If you read the book now, it's really cool. It's like a movie where it goes from past to present. And you got a lot of shows and movies, how they do that.
Yes.
I didn't know any of that stuff because I'm not a writer and I'm not a film director. He was like, no, we're going to do past to present. And I was like, what? I was like, how the hell is that going to work? It's got to be linear. He said, no, it's not. Let me explain to you how. So he really helped breathe life into this. Like he helped me rewrite it. He helped, obviously, he trimmed enormously. I went from 700 pages to 250 pages, right? I mean, this is a book that you can read in 6 hours. I've had friends of mine and people that I know in business read this on a plane ride to New York, right? So that helped enormously. I think the other tip that I would give people is that writing is like sports, right? It's like anything that you want to be good at. You have to be insanely disciplined about. You have to treat it like a sport. And the only way that you are successful in any sport or in business or in anything is you have to develop strong habits, right? So you have to develop the habit of every day from Monday to Friday from 5 to 6 a.m. I'm writing, right? So building the muscle, building the habit of writing every day is something that you have to do. And you have to set yourself deadlines and you have to say, okay, the first draft's got to be done by this date. Even if you blow by the date, right? Which I did 3 times. Even if you blow by the date, you got to give yourself a goal, right?
Mhm.
And then I think the last tip that I would give people who are considering writing a book, because again, you heard it from me, don't do it. The last tip that I would give people is, and there's a chapter obviously on this in the book, which is like so appropriate. You got to hold yourself accountable, right? So if you're going to do something like write a book, you need to go out and tell everybody about it. You need to jump up and down and put it in your blog and your social media and tell your parents and tell all your cousins and everything. You got to be like, look, I'm writing this book. It's going to be on this. It's going to come out for Christmas. And I want everybody to know, and I want you guys to read it. And so what I found, Keith, which was super interesting, is initially when I started, I was scared. I think everybody gets scared because you're like putting your voice out. My book is highly personal. There's shit in there that people read it and are like, holy shit, how did you possibly write about this and make it public? But I made myself accountable to a lot of people. I told so many people I was writing this book. I told my friends, my family, my ex-wife, my kids, my coach, my employees. Everybody knew I was writing this freaking book. And so when you do that, it forces you to be accountable and to work at it, because people start going, hey, what about the book? Dude, what's up with the book? Weren't you writing on the book? Wasn't it going to come out next month? Wasn't it going to come out in December? And all of a sudden you're on the hook.
Mhm.
And
It's
yeah, it was, those are the tips I would give to people.